Non-Monogamy Help is a podcast where your questions about open, non-monogamous or polyamorous relationships are answered. Our host, Lola Phoenix, will consult a licensed therapist with over a decade of experience to address your problems. Names and locations have been changed or censored to keep your questions anonymous. You're listening to Non-Monogamy Help, the podcast.
Hello and welcome to episode 163 of the Non-Monogamy Help podcast. I'm Lola Phoenix. Please send your questions to ask@nonmonogamyhelp.com and they'll either be in the podcast or the column anonymously. You're more than welcome to choose which. If you want to read the columns and listen to the podcast, you can get everything at nonmonogamyhelp.com. Sign up to early emails by going to nonmonogamyhelp.com/email. And you can follow the column on Instagram at nonmonogamyhelp and on TikTok at nonmonohelp. If you want to be awesome, you can also subscribe on the website at nonmonogamyhelp.com/subscribe. And if you join the podcast shout out tier, I will, with your permission, read your name at the end of the podcast. Let's get to this week's discussion question. If this is the first time you're hearing this, every week before I read the letter, I put forth a discussion question that you can use with your friends and anyone else you want to get to know better. I also answer myself, and I attempt to be brief, but, to give you a little bit of context, this week's discussion question is an Otter Being Polyamory conversation card discussion question, which is awesome. I don't think I've gotten through all of these, although I'm realizing I'm not keeping track, so deeply apologize if I answer the same question in more than one episode. Anyway, yeah, you can use these in a similar way that I've had discussion questions, and you can get them at nonmonogamyhelp.com/cards. And get 10% off using Non-Mono-Help at checkout. This week's discussion question is, how comfortable are you with seeing evidence of your partner's sexual activities with others, i.e. hickeys or bruises, toys, or stain sheets? I mean, firstly, stain sheets, gross. Like, clean up. That has nothing to do with anything. It's just, wow. Like, make sure you clean up after yourself. But other things, I think there might be a situation where it's kind of jarring, maybe. I can't recall of a situation where it's made me feel uncomfortable. I think sometimes, I know for me personally, sometimes I end up in situations where the scare that I might become jealous ends up being way more uncomfortable than jealousy actually would be. So, the awkwardness of being like, oh, am I going to feel jealous? I'm waiting for the jealousy to happen. And then I'm so uncomfortable that I may as well be jealous anyway because I'm so uncomfortable. So I might end up in situations like that where I'm kind of just like, oh, I'm waiting for the jealousy to come and I'm scared I'm going to be jealous. And I don't know. I think I don't really have any personal issues with it. People do things and I'm not pretending like they don't have another partner. And in some cases, if I've had crushes on people or if I like people and I follow them or I see them in situations where they're with their partners, I don't feel unhappy about that. Sometimes I'm just like, oh, they're so cute. I get a little, I guess it's compersion. Have I felt compersion? Is this the first time? No. But no, I think I actually feel the strongest amount of compersion when I fancy someone and I see the evidence of them liking someone else because they're happy. So why would I don't get it. I'm not unhappy about the situation because they're happy. So I want them to be happy. I don't know. That's how I feel about it. And if you do feel that way, I'm not saying that you're weird or bad or anything like that. I think sometimes, we're not emotionally prepared for situations like that. It could be a little bit jarring, could be a little bit surprising. It's not if you feel that way, you feel bad. But I personally don't tend to be bothered. Stain sheets is just gross. That, if you're going to be nasty, but that has nothing to do with the other person. It's just the hygiene, man. Clean up. Anyway, this week's discussion question is, how comfortable are you with seeing evidence of your partner's sexual activities with others, i.e. hickeys, bruises, toys, or stain sheets? Let's get to this week's question. I've had a few experiences of non-monogamy/polyamory in my past. My longest relationship was a multi-year monogamous cohabiting relationship that was also abusive. After that, I was in a romantic and sexual relationship, multi-year non-cohabitating, monogamous by default rather than design. At a couple points, my partner expressed attraction to others. I was accepting and supportive of this. I didn't consider this to be a deal breaker, but in the second incident, they felt it was a cause to end the relationship with me. I accepted and grieved the breakup and felt no anger or hatred towards my ex, only sadness. I would have been open to a non-monogamous relationship. I did perceive and interpret the breakup as a reflection on my desirability. We stayed friends for a further period of years, both still feeling strong love for each other. During that time, I reflected on my own relationship values and preferences and decided that I felt most inclined towards polyamory, specifically solo polyamory and the values of relationship anarchy. I talked with my friend/ex-partner, I'll call them L, about my realizations, and shared with them the short instructional manifesto for relationship anarchy, which they read and told me they agreed with. I explained to L that I was, from this point onwards, wanting to be polyamorous and practice the values of relationship anarchy. Some months later, we had a conversation using the relationship anarchy smorgasbord about becoming sexual and romantic together again. In this conversation, we agreed that we would not be exclusive to each other. Initially, we both dated others occasionally, not leading to anything. After a while, I connected with someone that I wanted to continue seeing. This was unusual for me. My reasons for wanting polyamory are similar to your own. I connect with people sexually/romantically rarely. Elle and I communicated openly and honestly and still seemed well. Some months on, as the other connection was developing, Elle began to experience feelings of distress. I tried to respond to these with validation, respect, and compassion. I thanked them for bringing their feelings up and offered time to talk about them. I heard that Elle was feeling anxious about replacement and offered reassurance verbally. We read Polysecure and looked at other resources too. I was also keen to consider the other person that I was forming a relationship with, as well as my own values, which had been carefully considered and arrived at. Elle's distress continued. I continued to always be willing to listen to their very considerable communications. In a practical sense, I showed Elle that they were a priority to me by committing to see them every week, something that I offered to nobody else, and always planning my time with them before scheduling other social commitments. We also talked about steps towards a more shared domesticity, sort of cohabitation, which again was something unique to our connection. We've had many emotional conversations, all of which seem to end with a positive resolution, with us reconnecting and feeling good together, although before long, Elle's distress would return, and mine too. I was obviously affected in turn by my effect on them. I'm aware that because we didn't live together, stuff like physical co-regulation, which is so often recommended, was difficult. After a few weeks, Elle withdrew their consent for non-monogamy, which was absolutely their right, essentially asking me to choose between a relationship with them or polyamory. I very much appreciate their considerable attempt at trying it. This was an extremely difficult decision for me. I love Elle deeply, however, I wanted to act in coherence with my values, which were very important to me, and not treat other relationships as disposable. Elle interpreted this dilemma as a sign of a lack of care about them or caring about them less than they cared about me. After much heart-wrenching deliberation, I tried to act in accordance with my values and sadly told them that we would need to renegotiate the terms of our relationship with each other, rather than me end independent relationships. Elle, on hearing this, seemed to respect my values and in fact expressed that they were willing to continue as we were in non-monogamy. Soon, though, Elle's distress was re-triggered, and we were back at the same place where I had to consider the same decision. By now, I was feeling incredibly judged for my values by Elle, who was repeatedly scathing and insulting about polyamory. Confused and under pressure, recognizing that the situation was also taking a toll on a third person. This time, I decided to break up with the other person and choose to be monogamous with Elle. It felt on a gut level like a decision that conflicted quite significantly with my values. I'd been concerned of not wanting to choose based on guilt or fear of not finding another person to be with long term. However, I recognize that I don't need to have multiple partners. It's much more of a values and principles thing for me, and I felt that in spite of the difficulties, there was a lot between us to cherish and be grateful for and hopeful about. I hoped that with the trigger of non-monogamy gone, things would settle and we could repair. After this point, Elle became very blaming towards me. They were intensely critical of me on a values level, and some of what they said gave me the impression that they had quite a different framing of what our relationship to each other was. They also began to find fault with a lot of the ways I was showing up as a partner. I listened and made an effort to see how I could be a better partner by listening to audiobooks and consuming resources about healthy relationships and examining my own psychology and patterns. At the same time, I wanted to feel that although I'd made this one decision that I'd struggle with, I could still in other ways be true to my values of relationship anarchy, for example, by honoring the equal significance of other friendships. Elle talked about leaving/breaking up many times, but always went back on that. One day, after starting to feel quite unwell with it all, I finally drew a line where I said that if there were any more flare-ups where they just berated me with a list of criticisms, that would have to be it for me. I explained why and pointed to better ways that we could communicate, something we could work on together as a team. Elle thought that this was unfair, even though they'd said the exact same thing about me hurting them any further. Shortly after that, I was plunged into an extended, frightening emergency situation, coinciding with a major professional commitment. To my dismay, Elle got angry with me about a minor slight right in the middle of the emergency that to them illustrated what a neglectful partner was. I apologized right away and more than once for this. I tried to tell them that it was one of the worst times of my life, let them know that the best way that they could support me was not to barrage me with criticism, and repeatedly expressed a boundary which Elle ignored. They escalated in that same vein, and that culmination was it for me. I felt an instinctual, intuitive level that telling Elle I didn't want to be partners was the right and only decision at this point, tragic and unwelcome though it was. After the breakup, Elle has smeared me on social media, sharing serious allegations of very personal information in detail. They've also bombarded me with communication, alternately seeking to get back together, praising and speaking affectionately and declaring love, and flipping back to calling me abusive and slut-shaming me. I can only now focus on myself and my own feelings. I've come out of this feeling very questioning of my own values. At the same time, I felt they were beautiful, they made sense to me and made me happy. I was excited to start navigating the rest of my relational life with clarity. For me, relationship anarchy is about freedom and autonomy for people who I love, but Elle's criticism of polyamory as greedy and individualistic has affected me. I wonder if after my abusive relationship and seeking to avoid past people-pleasing tendencies, I have overcorrected and been too firm on defending my independence. But then I wonder if actually my preferences were valid. I was not offering monogamy or the status of a couple unit when I first got back together with Elle. I feel massively detached from my sexuality at this point. I understand the breakup is very raw still. I'm grieving, so this is surprising that it's something harmful that I don't deserve to express it. I feel a huge amount of guilt for causing Elle pain. I tried to apply some DBT skills and I'm unsure if guilt is appropriate, and I also think I've acted in accordance with my values and tried to be caring and considerate without immediately abandoning my principles. Do you have any advice for how long I began to reconnect with what once felt so clear from within me? Before we get to this week's answer, I'm going to quickly remind you of this episode's sponsor, BetterHelp. Quite often in my columns and podcasts, I encourage people to seek a therapist. Therapy is really important. For a lot of people, finding a polyamory-friendly therapist is impossible or out of their budget, especially locally. And BetterHelp will allow you to find and interview lots of different therapists online that you can send messages to. And they also offer some financial aid. You can get 10% off your first month by using the promo code Non-Monogamy Help at checkout or going to betterhelp.com/non-monogamy help. Let's get to this week's answer. You have gone through something really awful. This is horrible. This is a horrible experience. And, you said that you were in an this is an abusive relationship. And far be it from me for diagnose Elle. Obviously, I'm getting one side of the story. I don't know what's going on, but this doesn't sound good in a lot of ways. And you are bending over backwards to give Elle the benefit of the doubt, the grace. I feel like your situation is one of the biggest reasons why people say that typical relationship advice and couples therapy doesn't work in abusive relationships. This is a big reason why. I feel like you definitely still have a people-pleasing tendency, because what you had here, from what I can see and what you've provided, is that you had this connection to relationship anarchy for the purposes similar to me. You're not necessarily super interested in dating loads of people, but you value autonomy and freedom, and this is about the principle of the thing rather than necessarily needing to sleep with a bunch of people or have a bunch of relationships. And you had that really strongly for yourself, and then this person comes along and they aren't even sure of themselves. Everything that they've criticized polyamory for is a reflection of their own shittiness. They can't decide what they want. It sounds like they consistently utilized their emotional, they knew that their emotions, I don't know what they knew. But this is what it sounds like. They knew that having an emotional reaction would cause you to also have an emotional reaction. And they could slowly chip away at the situation by just continuously having this emotional reaction. Even if what they said, this is textbook devaluation and pedestal, especially what they're doing now. It's very textbook. And if you haven't read Why Does He Do That by Lindy Bancroft, I definitely recommend you read that, because it shows you the way that this type of thing operates in a way that you can't really see it when you're in the middle of it. But this sort of thing of it's really selfish and individualistic. What about what they did wasn't selfish and individualistic, right? When you said that they withdrew their consent for non-monogamy, which they have every right to, no, that's not what they did. I say this with all the love in the world to you, but no, that's not what they did. They forced you. They attempted to force you to break up with other people. They put you in an ultimatum situation. Like, if it would be one thing if Elle came to you and said, look, I know that we kind of started off in this non-monogamy journey, but I'm feeling like this is not what I want. So I feel like it's the best thing for me is to end this relationship and to seek out something. That's what people with fucking integrity do. Somebody with no integrity, which I clearly have no patience for, as you can tell, is someone who demands that someone else break up with other and puts them in that. That is the mark of a coward. And there is nothing righteous or okay with what Elle did. It's fine if people don't want to do non-monogamy. That is absolutely okay. And sometimes people are not going to know that it's not what they want until they actually do it. That is fine. That is legitimate. And it is also legitimate to not want to do non-monogamy anymore. What is not legitimate and what is not withdrawing your consent, what is not okay, is then forcing the other person to have to make a decision between you and another person. That's not acceptable. If you are the one who is initiating the breakup, or if you were the one who was wanting to change the terms of the relationship to such a degree that it will involve other people, you don't foist that decision on somebody else. That is cowardly, selfish, individualistic behavior. There is nothing okay with that, beyond all of the other shit that you describe here of what Elle has done. And it really, really worries me because you are a lovely person, it seems like. And of course, everyone makes mistakes in relationships. I'm not saying you're an angel and that you did everything right, whatever the fuck that means. But what I am saying is that you're constantly, I hope that you come back to this letter. I hope you save it. And after you get some therapy for a few months, I hope you come back to read it. Because what I see constantly in this letter is you constantly trying to make room for Elle to be this wonderful person, for Elle to it's okay that they did that, they had the right, you're trying to peacekeep in this letter. And I actually want you to be angry on behalf of yourself because you had this principle of relationship anarchy, which you agreed with. Somebody basically came along and slowly twisted you away from that. And you are a grown adult. You are responsible for your decisions. I'm not saying that, you were completely subject to Elle's whims. And that's something for you to learn and something for you to take on board going forward. Notice that you have a pattern. This is a people-pleasing pattern. You've identified this. These aren't past people-pleasing tendencies. And you have not been, I want to stress this with every fabric of my being, you have not been too firm on demanding your independence or defending your independence. My dude, you have been anything, you're still people-pleasing in this letter. You have not overcorrected. In my opinion, you've undercorrected. The very moment that somebody would have come to me and said, well, I'm not into non-monogamy anymore, so you're just going to have to either be with me or be with that other person, I would have been like, okay, fine, bye. I have no tolerance for people who attempt to shove that decision on me. That is the antithesis to me of relationship anarchy, as someone who is forcing me, attempting to force me. I mean, they will not force me. I'll do what the fuck I want. But attempting to force me to end a relationship with somebody else. And I don't even care if it's any kind of relationship. I don't even care if it's a friendship, as if that means less. Anyone who attempts to control me in such a way, automatically no. So you have not overcorrected by any means. And the fact that after you ended things, after you finally were like, I can't do this anymore, I can't deal with this anymore, that Elle's response is to blast you on social media, this is one of the reasons why I really think that the culture of the way sometimes things, I'm not saying every time, but the way sometimes things go down online, this is exactly the kind of situation where you don't, somebody who is like this can utilize that type of community response to a negative. I don't know all the details of that, but my point is that this behavior that Elle has consistently demonstrated has been horrific. And I'm wondering if I don't even know the half of it, because I'm sure that you're not that you're trying to portray Elle at a good light, but I'm sure that there's stuff that you're not including in here. And woof. It's not surprising to me that you feel like you're out of touch with yourself, because consistently you've prioritized Elle's feelings and Elle's perspective and Elle's point of view over yourself. And what you do when you do that to yourself, when you allow another person's whims and wishes and will, we all, I'm not saying you should be totally like, I don't care about anybody, fuck anybody. I'm not saying that. But what I am saying is that when we get to a point where we no longer advocate for ourselves anymore, when we no longer, it's like you don't even have any needs and wants anymore, and we really betray ourselves. And I really want you to especially look over the part where you talked about, well, I don't need other partners. What? That doesn't mean anything. You need to be true to yourself is what you need. It doesn't matter if you're not sitting there, horny AF or whatever, and being like, that's not what this is about. You need to be true to yourself. You need to be true to your values. You need to make decisions based upon the alignment that you have with your own values. That's what you need. It doesn't matter if we've chosen more or less polyamory for the same reasons. It sounds like that's still a need. And it, really, like, whenever you're in a situation where you're downplaying the things that you want in life, and wants are fucking important too. You only have one life to live, for God's sakes. Like, honestly, we get such limited time on this fucking planet. Like, I'm not saying, blow all your money in a casino and booze or whatnot, but come on, man. Your life is more than just what Elle can get out of you. Your life is more than what other people can get out of you. You matter, and the things that you want matter. The things that it doesn't even matter if it's a need. If you want a fucking chocolate sundae, go eat a fucking chocolate sundae. It doesn't matter if you need it or not. I just want you to look at this situation. And the fact that you think you've overcorrected, my dude, you have not overcorrected.
Hello, this is Later Editing Lola. I am about to talk about someone called Haley Page McGee, who has some amazing resources. Unfortunately, I was very, very silly at the time and said her name wrong multiple times, and I'm just going to be saying Haley Page, but I mean Haley Page McGee, and it's going to sound weird, but that's who I actually mean. And if she listens to it, I'm so sorry that I was a goofball that day and did not properly get your name right. So yeah, that's what's gonna happen. Cool.
I really think you should check out Haley Page's resources on people pleasing. She has so much amazing stuff to say about people pleasing, so much amazing resources on her Instagram, on her website. I'm sure she does more than just that. I would check her out because I think she also has a book as well. I've been less and less of a people pleaser as time has gone by, so I haven't necessarily needed to delve in too much. But even the things that I've read from her are so great and so impactful, and I can't recommend her enough. So please check her out. Haley Page, as I've said, Paige. Amazing resources on people pleasing. And I think that will be such a good start for you. Definitely speak to a therapist about all of this, especially if you're being actively attacked by an asshole online. Please make sure that you have the support for that. I think it's going to take a little bit of time for you to parse out and figure out what your own personal values are. There may be a thing that you do, and this may come from survival. This isn't something you're doing to be a jerk to yourself, but it might be that you've grown up in situations where you've needed to basically kind of personally mesh with the people that are around you. You need to repeat what they're saying, do the same thing they're saying. You need to go in with the crowd because that, or whoever's the strongest personality in the room, because that's what's been safe for you. And so maybe you're going to have to figure out what your own personal values are. And I think you've started off in a good place. Relationship anarchy was something you wanted, something you were clear on. And I think as you kind of pick apart a little bit of those people-pleasing tendencies, you're going to be able to kind of get back to a place where you know what is you and not is what some other person's belief. Because it does sound like you were kind of easily influenced. Not easily influenced. It sounds like you were influenced by Elle, and that has kind of left a lasting effect. This does seem like it was a slow kind of churn, just almost death by 1,000 cuts type of death by 1,000 emotional distress reactions. And also, I do genuinely feel like if you are going to be a relationship anarchist going forward, there is going to have to be a certain amount of sitting in the discomfort of other people's feelings. You are going to have to learn to say no to people, and for them to be unhappy about that, and for you to sit in that discomfort. And Haley Page has tons of stuff about this that also really helps. But that is a really, really important skill in general for life, but definitely within non-monogamy, because if you do have multiple partners, you are going to, and also even just for yourself, you are going to have to learn how to say no to people. And you are going to have to learn that disappointing people is okay. Adults can handle disappointment. It's not your responsibility to manage somebody else's feelings or emotions about that disappointment. You can be kind, and it does sound like you were attempting to be that with Elle. But ultimately, Elle was a grown fucking adult. And if Elle didn't want to be in a non-monogamous relationship, they also had the power to step away at any time. And they were consistently cowardly from this description and ended up being the ultimate coward and putting that decision on you, which was not fair. The other thing that I really, really, really want you to be aware of in any kind of relationship, any relationship going forward, is contempt. The Gottman Institute writes about this as one of the 4 horsemen of like relationship apocalypse, or one of the worst things that in relationships will spell the end. Contempt is a huge thing, both within yourself and within other people. And that is when somebody, like the contempt that I see it bleeding through some of these descriptions that you have of Elle. The contempt Elle has of polyamory is a direct reflection of the contempt they have for you. And when somebody has contempt, it's not great. I'm going to actually read from the Gottman Institute website just because I think it's so important. Contempt, simply put, says, I'm better than you and you are lesser than me. Contempt is fueled by long simmering negative thoughts about one's partner and arises in the form of an attack on someone's sense of self. Inevitably, contempt leads to more conflict, particularly dangerous and destructive forms of conflict, rather than to reconciliation. It's virtually impossible to resolve a problem when your partner is getting the message that you're disgusted with them and that you're condescending and act as their superior. So some examples that they give on like forms of contempt that people might dish out is like, look how I learned to tell time when I was 5 years old. When are you ever going to learn? Or another one, we haven't had sex in months. What are you too busy flirting with that guy at work? Why don't you just marry him instead? I mean, that's fucking awful. But your kind of descriptions of the contempt that Elle had for polyamory, I want you to pay extra attention to contempt. And contempt, like, it doesn't even have to be about you. Like, if it's contempt about something which is of core value that you have, that is still something that needs to be focused on, that you need to go, okay, this is contempt. Like, it's not good. It is a poison. It's a poison in any type of relationship. And it also is destructive of your personal health. Yet how can you feel happy as a person if someone you care about and love about has contempt for you or contempt for things that define you? So anytime, like, be very aware of the way that people react. Like, everybody has disgust as a core emotion. That's why I love Inside Out. Like, I could go on about that film and how awesome it is. But disgust is a core emotion. We feel disgust in certain situations. It's not to say we'll never feel disgust. But if that disgust is pointed at you or at your relationship, then that is something that I want you to pay extra attention to. And I want you to look around. Do you have other relationships in your life where you excuse this, where people show disgust about you or about something that matters to you? Because that is not good. That is not going to lead to good places. So please, please pay attention to contempt and whenever it shows up in your relationships. So yeah, overall, I've gone all over the place because there's so much about this situation. And I'm so, so sorry that you went through this. Like, this is awful, awful. Like, I can't stress how awful this fucking shit is, man. I think that definitely fucking block Elle if you haven't already. Jesus Christ. Like, I definitely separate yourself from that situation. I think that really look at Haley Page's resources on people pleasing. Please see if you can get therapy, talk to a therapist about this situation, break it apart, think about it, write about it, journal about it. Like, especially because I'm really concerned that you think you've overcorrected and been too firm. You made the absolute right fucking decision. And my hope is genuinely that you'll be able to have such a strong sense of self and such a strong sense of what it is that you want. And I think you're getting there. Like, you do have that. It may just be, unfortunately, you met this dickhead and that's the situation, but you are getting there. You had a really strong sense of self. And I do believe you can get back to that. You may just need a little bit of time to like pick apart the situation and deal with it and mourn the situation and all of this shit. Like, you may just need a little bit of time, but you did have a strong, like, go back, reread the relationship anarchy stuff. Immerse yourself in people and situations and the content you consume. Immerse yourself in things that encourage you to feel strongly about yourself, like encourage you to trust yourself. This is going to be about building trust with yourself again. Because what a lot of these situations end up doing is that when you betray your own feelings and your own desires and your own wants and the things that your values in life, you teach yourself that you can't trust yourself. And then you and that might be why you even leaned even further into L. When you start betraying yourself a little bit more, then you have to find some other source of stability. You have to find some other source of constantness or just something. You have to find something to lean on. Sometimes it's just constant anxiety and freaking out. Like the little kid in you is like, okay, I guess we can't protect ourselves, so it's my job as the little kid. And the little kid doesn't know how to emotionally regulate. So, I think if you can kind of rebuild that trust in yourself again, find those things that make you feel that way. Like pay attention to how you feel. Reread that relationship anarchy thing. Reread the smorgasbord. Pay attention to how you feel when you are acting in alignment with your values and hang around other people who make you feel that way too. Hang around, read content that makes you feel that way too. I think that that's really, really important. I also think that, read a little bit about like contempt. I think that would also really help. Why Does He Do That by Lindy Bancroft would also really help identifying these kind of patterns that people have. The contempt thing was really important for me, actually, and it helped me avoid a really fucking horrible situation. I don't know if that person would have necessarily been terribly abusive or anything. They ended up using me to cheat, but it was because of that book, because of Why Does He Do That by Lindy Bancroft, that I recognized that this person, like over time, he would make like little small comments and they would make me feel like shit. And I would kind of gloss over it and I'd be like, oh, well, he's just having a bad day, blah, blah, blah. Like I'd make excuses for it. And it would make me feel super awkward because I wanted to confront him about it and be like, hey, this made me feel like shit and please don't do that. And then over time, I just started feeling like, man, this guy continuously kind of makes me feel like shit. And I don't want that in my life anymore. And it didn't have to be that he was abusive. It's just like, why is he doing this? And then I have to kind of constantly have these discussions with him. Like, hey, you said this thing that made me feel like shit. Like, I don't want to have to spend 50% of a relationship that I have with someone confronting them about the things they said that made me feel like shit. Like, why? Why would I spend my life doing that? And it was because of that book. And then he ended up being a dickhead. So he said things that were contemptuous. He said things that made me feel judged. He said things that made me feel like he thought I was stupid. And why I'm not going to be with anyone who thinks I'm stupid, who has contempt for me. And so I think that's something really to pay attention to. And I'm really hoping that you have a really strong support network or that you have friends who don't treat you this way. Because there's so many times, even after that experience, where I was in relationships with people where they were just negative. They didn't have contempt for me, but they had contempt for the world around them. And it was just a fucking bummer. It's just awful, like constant negativity, constant source of blah in my life. And it made me feel blah. And it also pulled me into that contempt cycle and pulled me into that negative cycle of like constantly being negative all the time. So I hope that you can kind of like examine your social circle, examine the type of content that you consume and see if it's leading you into a much more positive place of trusting yourself and rebuilding that trust with yourself is going to take a little bit of time. I do think you can get there. I think that it's just a matter. I think I'm hoping that hearing this will be helpful for you. And maybe you need to like talk more about it, like go into make posts in places, like join new communities and be like, this is what happened to me. Sometimes we need a little bit of that moment. There's a thing that I'm going to be sharing, or I probably will have shared already by this point on my Instagram, which is called like the 4 steps of trauma recovery. And it's kind of something like a framework that has helped me kind of understand how I've gone through trauma. So like the first step is denial. And this is like, this didn't happen to me. It wasn't that bad. It happened to me and I turned out fine. And that's kind of a stage where people are like in full denial that something's happened to them. It's too much for their brains to process. So it's easy to just deny it or deny its impact. And I think in relationships, It's kind of like, oh, that person's just joking. It's fine. Like, nothing's fine. Like everything's fine. The little dog with the fire all around them. The next stage is self-attack. So that's, I can prevent this from happening again if I do X. This is the midway between fully accepting that something's happened to you, but still creating rules and attempting to control what you can't control to try and delude yourself into thinking that you can stop it again. This works temporarily, but is unsustainable because it requires self-blame and is a side quest from the full issue. So this is like you going, oh, well, I don't need partners, or like maybe I can, rearrange this, or maybe, I can prevent L from, doing it by being a good partner. I just need to read more podcasts. I just need to read more books and better improve myself so that I can prevent this from happening again. And you might be at that stage right now where you think that if you can just fix yourself well enough that you can prevent yourself from being in a situation like this again. And it's temporarily empowering. It gives you temporary hope, but it's ultimately not, I think, not a good place to put yourself in. And then you have like the victimization stage. So that's where you fully acknowledge I am or I was a victim of this. And this allows you to fully acknowledge the impact of an event that happened. But it still requires, like, getting stuck in this stage is not great, because it still requires that you maintain a position of a lack of agency. So it's important for you to be able to fully admit that you've had this experience and to accept and process the emotions. But remaining in this stage kind of repeats a cycle of victimization. So you might need to be in a stage where you can fully say, I was a victim of these situations. Like, this happened to me. I think that's important, because we kind of sometimes blame ourselves and think, oh, well, we could have prevented it. Like, fully being able to embrace that, like, I am a victim, this happened to me, is really, really important. Again, not staying in that situation is something that is really, really important as well. And then self-actualization is like the last stage. So this happened to me. It's where you say, this happened to me, but I trust myself to take care of me. So this allows for one to accept the fullness of the impact of events, while at the same time being able to act as an active agent in one's life. One builds resilience and trust within oneself. One cannot completely prevent another traumatic event from reoccurring, but one is much more capable of recovery with trust in oneself. So this isn't about you being so good at relationships or so good at correcting the situations in the past that you never, ever encounter another L in your life. You may encounter another L in your life. It's not something that you can control, and trying to take control of that is only going to lead to further feeling of self-abandonment and and victimization, because you can't control that. But what you can do is you can always take care of yourself, and you've done a good job so far. Like, please don't think that this is a failure. Like, what happened with Elle is not an illustration of a failure of anything that you've done. It's not you failing to protect yourself. It's not, don't be so obsessed by spotting red flags that you think that situations happened in the past because you didn't spot the red flags well enough. That's not what this is about. It's a situation that happened. You were definitely a victim. And in my perspective of the situation, you were definitely a victim. But you can step through going forward, learn how to better trust yourself and better take care of yourself. You will get better at taking care of yourself. You absolutely will. It's just going to take a little bit of time. And I think if you can kind of make little steps towards that and maybe give yourself a little bit of space to be the victim, like if you have to, talk to your friends, cry it out, be a little bit in that moment. Sometimes even in situations where no one's been abusive to me and it's just not worked out, just being able to sit there and bitch about someone has been really, really helpful. It's not about someone being wrong or needing to take to the streets and find this person. You could, sometimes it's just nice to for you to just bitch about someone and for someone to go, that person's a real dick. And we go, yeah, they are a dick. And you need a little bit of time where you can just sit there and just call Elle every name in the book and just have that time to just be mad and express that and get it out of your system and be able to be in that situation for a while. And then I think you'll learn to step into your power a little bit more and feel like you're actually able to, take control of situations. And maybe you're not able to control everything. And you won't be able to control everything. You're not going to be able to prevent another Elle from walking into your life. You can't. There's nothing about that you can ultimately control. But you will absolutely get better at taking care of yourself. I think you will get better at identifying the way that some people behave, that, you can then learn to step in a little bit sooner. And that's sometimes really, really helpful. But ultimately, even if you don't step in, and even if you were to kind of go through this a little bit again, you have the ability to protect yourself. You have the ability to get better. You've already done that. You've already shown that. You took that step. And if nobody else says it to you, I'm very proud of you for taking that step, for actually saying enough is enough and I'm tired of this and I'm not putting up with it anymore. I'm very, very proud of you for taking that step. You did a really good thing there in actually advocating to yourself. So lean into that more. And I think that things will get better. It's just going to take a little bit of time, but I definitely think things will get better if you can kind of take those steps. So yeah, I hope that helps and good luck. Thank you for listening to I forgot what episode it is. Thank you for listening to episode 163 of the Non-Monogamy Help podcast. If you want to be awesome, you can sign up to the website and support me by going to nonmonogamyhelp.com/subscribe. And you can choose the podcast shoutout support tier there. It's a little bit more money. It's a little bit more help if you would be so kind. My current podcast shoutout supporters are Hermé, Mike Kander, Matthias Caden. If for whatever reason you can't support economically, here are some things you can do. Subscribe on the free tier on the website at nonmonogamyhelp.com/subscribe. Sign up to the emails I send out on Wednesdays. You get like the column in the podcast in your inbox before anyone else does. It's super secret, not really. nonmonogamyhelp.com/email. Take a screenshot of the podcast and share it to your stories and tag the Non-Monogamy Help Instagram account, and maybe on TikTok. I don't know. You can do whatever you want on TikTok. I'm still trying to figure things out. I feel like a boomer. Anyway, rate and review the podcast on iTunes and Spotify. That's all for this week. You'll get a new column next Friday, another podcast episode in a fortnight. Thank you again for listening.
You've been listening to Non-Monogamy Help. The music was done by Chris Albury Jones at albury-jones.com. Thank you for listening.